Defeat teaches lessons that victory never reveals. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, January 1944. Frost clings to the hulking shapes of olive-drab steel lined across the frozen testing range. Inside Building 311, engineers huddle around a salvaged German armor plate 80 millimeters thick, angled at 55 degrees, pockmarked with impact craters but fundamentally intact. Each crater tells a story of American failure. Colonel Joseph Colby traces his finger across the scarred metal surface, feeling the texture of inadequacy. 23 hits from our 75 millimeter gun at combat range, he says quietly. Not one penetration. The room falls silent, except for the metallic tapping of his wedding ring against German steel, a percussion rhythm measuring the gap between American confidence and battlefield reality. This is the sound of men dying, he continues. Every mark here represents a Sherman crew that fired, watched their shell bounce off, and had 3 seconds to understand they were already dead. According to military historian R.P. Honeycutt's research documented in Pershing, A History of the Medium Tank T-20 Series, American tank doctrine in 1943 operated on assumptions that had become dangerous delusions. General Leslie McNair's philosophy dominated procurement. Mobility and quantity would defeat enemy quality. The Sherman was designed not to win duels, but to win wars through overwhelming numbers and mechanical reliability. France proved this doctrine catastrophic. Staff Sergeant Robert Early, 3rd Armored Division, returned from Normandy in December 1943 with documentation that military censors initially tried to suppress. He brought photographs. Burned-out Shermans, turrets blown 30 feet from their hulls, interiors transformed into cremation chambers. He brought after-action reports describing German Panthers engaging American columns at 1,500 yards distances where Sherman gunners couldn't even see their targets clearly through their optics. Most damning, he brought testimony from tank crews who survived. "We hit a Panther 7 times before it turned around," one corporal reported. "It killed all 5 tanks in our platoon with 8 shots. The mathematics don't support survival." The German Panzer Kampfwagen V Panther represented everything American tank designers had dismissed as unnecessary. Its 75 millimeter key BWK 42 liters, 70 gun-fired shells at over 3,000 feet per second, nearly double the velocity of Sherman's weapon. Its frontal armor, brilliantly sloped to maximize effective thickness, rendered it essentially invulnerable to American tank fire at normal combat ranges. Wehrmacht tankers called it Diva von Europa, Europe's lioness. They were not boasting, they were describing tactical reality. Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann, 2nd Panzer Division, wrote in his combat diary, "The Americans build tanks like sausages. We cook them just as quickly. 5 Shermans for 1 Panther is not a victory ratio. It is extermination mathematics that eventually runs out of Shermans." But here is what Hoffmann did not write, what no German tanker in 1943 could imagine. American factories could afford those ratios indefinitely while simultaneously building something better. At Detroit Tank Arsenal, engineers had been working in near secrecy on experimental designs designated T-20, T-23, T-25, E-1. Each iteration pushed beyond Sherman's limitations: wider tracks, torsion bar suspension, electric turret traverse, and critically, guns that could finally hurt German armor. The T-25E1 mounted a 90 millimeter gun, adapted from anti-aircraft artillery, a weapon capable of penetrating Panther's frontal plate at combat ranges. But McNair's voice echoed through every procurement meeting. "Heavy tanks will clog ports, overwhelm bridges, consume fuel we cannot spare. We need 5,000 adequate tanks, not 500 excellent ones." His doctrine killed thousands of American tankers. By autumn 1943, the mathematics of attrition had become undeniable. At Mortain, American armor suffered 60% casualties attempting to stop German counterattack. At Ericourt, 3rd Armored Division lost 48 Shermans in 3 days fighting Panthers across open terrain. The German tanks fought from hull-down positions, invisible behind ridges, killing at distances where American return fire was merely optimistic gestures. Inside Aberdeen's ballistics laboratory, engineers conducted experiments that felt like forensic investigations into American failure. They fired captured German ammunition at Sherman replicas, documenting penetration angles, spalling effects, crew survival rates. The data was clinical and devastating. At 800 yards, Panther shells penetrated Sherman's frontal armor with 97% reliability. At the same range, Sherman shells bounced off Panther armor with 93% consistency. Dr. Samuel Feltman, civilian metallurgist contracted to Aberdeen, provided analysis that ordnance officials found uncomfortable. German armor doctrine accepts that tanks will be destroyed. They design for crew survivability after penetration ammunition stored low, escape hatches positioned optimally. American doctrine assumes tanks won't be penetrated. When that assumption fails, crews burn alive. The psychological dimension, compounded tactical disadvantage. Sherman crews in Normandy developed what psychiatrists later termed armor anxiety, paralyzing fear of facing Panthers that manifested as hesitation, poor decision-making, refusal to advance. Combat reports describe entire platoons halting when spotting Panther silhouettes, waiting for air support or tank destroyers rather than engaging directly. This was not cowardice. This was rational response to physics that made heroism synonymous with suicide. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson Hawkins, commanding officer of 3rd Armored's 33rd Regiment, wrote to McNair's successor in November 1943. Our tankers are not lacking courage. They are lacking the tools to win. When 5-to-1 odds become the expected exchange rate, we are not conducting warfare, we are feeding men into industrial thresher and calling it doctrine. But McNair's death in July 1944, killed by American bombs falling short during Operation Cobra, finally broke the ideological logjam. His replacement, General Jacob Devers, had witnessed Normandy's charnel house firsthand. Within weeks, he authorized emergency procurement of the T-26E3, designed the tank that would become the M26 Pershing. 46 tons, 90mm M3 gun, frontal armor 3 inches thick, maximum speed 25 miles per hour. Production cost, $60,000 per unit, double that of a Sherman. Ordnance Chief General Gladion Barnes stood before the first completed prototype in Detroit Arsenal, December 1944. The factory floor stretched behind him, assembly lines where workers, many of them women, many working their first industrial jobs, guided massive steel plates toward welding stations. The smell was acrid. Cutting oil, electrical discharge, human sweat transformed into military capability. This tank exists because we failed, Barnes told the assembled engineers and military officials. It exists because we sent boys to fight panzers with pea shooters and called it doctrine. Every weld in this hull, every machine component, every sight picture calibration, all of it purchased with American blood we should have protected better. According to industrial historian Charles Hyde's research on wartime production, the Pershing program represented the most rapid heavy tank development in American history. From final design approval to first deliveries, 14 months. By comparison, German Panther development took 32 months. But speed came at a cost. Initial Pershings suffered mechanical problems, transmission failures, engine overheating, electrical gremlins in the turret traverse system. These were acceptable trade-offs. A tank that might break down was infinitely preferable to a tank that definitely couldn't penetrate enemy armor. By February 1945, 20 Pershings shipped to Europe under Operation Zebra Code, named for emergency combat trials. They arrived at Antwerp aboard Liberty ships, their hulls still smelling of fresh paint and cutting oil. Crews from 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions trained on them in frozen Belgian fields, learning new gun-laying procedures, familiarizing themselves with hydraulic systems Sherman crews never imagined. Staff Sergeant Clarence Smoyer, assigned to command Pershing No. 38, which his crew nicknamed Fireball, remembered seeing the tank for the first time. It looked like Sherman's bigger, meaner older brother. Same general shape, but everything just heavier. When you touched that armor, you could feel the difference. This thing wasn't going to crumple like tinfoil when a Panther looked at it wrong. But 20 tanks against thousands of Panthers and Tigers scattered across collapsing Reich? The mathematics remained grim. Pershing arrived not to win the war but to vindicate a principle. American tankers deserved equipment that gave them fighting chance, rather than requiring suicide courage to compensate for engineering inadequacy. At Aberdeen, as news arrived of first Pershing deployments, the engineers who had worked double shifts through 2 winters gathered around radios listening for combat reports. They had built answer to German armor superiority. Whether that answer arrived in time to matter, that remained unknown. The salvaged Panther armor plate still sat in Building 311, a monument to American humiliation. Soon it would become artifact testament not to what Germans could build, but to what Americans learned from being beaten. Some lessons require defeat to teach. The Pershing was American military acknowledging it had been wrong, learning from failure, and building correction even as war ended around them. Pride becomes weapon when backed by steel that proves it justified. Normandy, France, July 1944. Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann commands Panther No. 234, 2nd Panzer Division, positioned hull down behind Norman hedgerow with only his cupola and gun barrel visible above the earthen berm. Through Zeiss optics, he watches American column approaching. Along sunken farm road, 12 Sherman tanks, infantry half-track following, dust rising in afternoon heat. The Americans move with careful confidence of men who believe reconnaissance has cleared their route. They are wrong. Range 1,400 meters. Target, led Sherman. Hoffmann's gunner, Unterscharführer Klaus Braun, veteran of Kursk, survivor of countless duels against Soviet T-34 seconds, adjusts his sight picture with practiced efficiency. The Panther's gun stabilizes. Breathe. Wait for pause between heartbeats. Fire. The 75mm KBUK-42 roars. The tungsten core shell crosses 1,400 meters in under 2 seconds faster than sound, reaching the target. The Sherman's glacis plate, angled but inadequately thin, might as well be paper. Penetration is absolute. Fire erupts through turret seams as ammunition cooks off. The crew has perhaps 3 seconds between impact and combustion. Most don't use them. Second Sherman halts, turret traversing frantically, searching for threat it cannot see. Hoffmann's Panther remains invisible behind terrain, only gun barrel exposed, target too small for panicked Sherman gunner to acquire. Second shot, second kill. This Sherman burns faster direct hit on ammunition storage. The turret launches upward in fireball that momentarily eclipses sun. Infantry scatter from half-tracks, seeking cover that doesn't exist in open French farmland. Third Sherman attempts to reverse. Predictable. Hoffmann's gunner leads the target, anticipating retreat. Third shot, third kill. The Sherman slews sideways, track broken, engine compartment smoking. Remaining 9 Shermans pour fire toward hedgerow. Shells impact earth, shred foliage, generate massive dust clouds. Not one round comes within 50 meters of Hoffmann's position. They are firing at memory at where muzzle flash appeared, not at actual target. Fourth shot, fifth shot, 2 more Shermans burning. The American column breaks, remaining tanks scattering off-road into fields, abandoning formation discipline for survival instinct. According to combat psychologist Dave Grossman's research in On Killing, the psychological impact of being unable to effectively return fire destroys unit cohesion faster than casualties alone. Soldiers can accept losses when they can fight back. When enemy can kill them from distances where retaliation is impossible, helplessness transforms into panic. Hoffmann watches the Americans retreat, leaving 5 burning hulls and at least 15 dead tankers. His Panther remains untouched. Total engagement time, 7 minutes. Ammunition expended, 5 rounds. Exchange ratio, 5-0. He keys radio to division headquarters, reports contact, reports kills, requests permission to relocate before American artillery inevitably plasters the area. Permission granted. His driver reverses the Panther out of position. They retreat through French countryside using back roads and forest trails, disappearing before counter-battery fire arrives. This scene replays across Normandy hundreds of times daily. Panthers and Tigers dominate American armor through combination of superior optics, superior guns, superior armor, and critically superior tactical positioning. German tankers fight defensively from prepared positions, using terrain to maximize their advantages while minimizing exposure. Hauptmann Heinrich von Schroeder, commanding 3rd Company, 116th Panzer Division, writes in after-action report, "The Americans approach tank combat with industrial mindset. They expect to overwhelm through numbers. They have not internalized that, in armored warfare, he who sees and shoots first from superior position defeats numerical advantage. One Panther properly positioned kills 5 Shermans before they close to effective range." But von Schroeder's report contains seeds of German defeat even while celebrating tactical victories. One paragraph, buried in technical details, acknowledges reality Wehrmacht command refuses to accept. However, American replacement rate exceeds our ability to inflict losses. Today we destroyed 12 Shermans. Tomorrow, 15 appear. Our victories are tactical. Their victories are mathematical. The Panther itself embodies Germany's wartime contradictions, engineering excellence produced by economy sliding toward collapse. Each Panther requires 7,000 man-hours to build. Each Sherman, 2,000. Panther's Maybach HL 230 P30 engine produces 700 horsepower, but demands specialized maintenance and consumes fuel at rates Germany's dwindling reserves cannot sustain. Obergefreiter Gustav Kessler, Panther driver with Panzer Lehr Division, describes the machine with mixture of affection and frustration. She is magnificent when she runs. Fastest tank on battlefield, gun that can reach out and touch targets other panzers cannot even see. But maintenance is nightmare. Transmission fails constantly. Final drives wear out after 150 kilometers. We strip parts from one Panther to keep two others operational. This maintenance crisis accelerates through summer 1944. Allied air supremacy makes daylight movement suicidal Panthers that could reach battlefield in hours, instead crawl forward at night, burning fuel, wearing components, arriving exhausted before firing single shot. Supply lines crumble under constant air attack. Replacement parts, replacement crews, replacement fuel, all become increasingly scarce. Yet in direct combat, Panther remains dominant. American tankers develop elaborate tactical schemes, attempting to neutralize its advantages. Multiple Shermans attacking simultaneously from different angles, forcing Panther to choose which threat to engage while others close distance. These tactics work sometimes at cost of 50% casualties among attacking force. Staff Sergeant William Lucas, 3rd Armored Division, describes the terror of facing Panthers. You'd be rolling along, feeling exposed and vulnerable, and suddenly there's this crack like thunder and Johnson's tank just explodes. You never see where it came from. The Panther's firing from tree line 1,500 yards out, and your gun can't do shit at that range. So you charge, because sitting still means dying, and you hope you get close enough to hurt it before it kills everyone. The Panther's psychological dominance extends beyond immediate combat. Sherman crews develop superstitious behaviors, refusing to occupy lead position in columns, hesitating before cresting ridges, requesting infantry reconnaissance before advancing through any terrain offering concealment. Combat efficiency degrades as self-preservation instincts override tactical training. American commanders respond with combined arms tactics that minimize tank versus tank engagements. Artillery fire pre-registered on likely Panther positions. Close air support requested immediately upon contact. Tank destroyers M10S and M36S with 90mm guns rush forward to engage while Shermans provide supporting fire. These adaptations reduce casualties but cannot eliminate fundamental problem. America fights the war with tanks inadequate for their role. Meanwhile, in German tank parks, Panthers sit immobile for want of fuel. Crews perform maintenance without spare parts, cannibalizing damaged vehicles to keep others operational. The magnificent beasts of German propaganda become metal monuments to industrial exhaustion, capable of victory but unable to reach battlefields where victory matters. Lieutenant Hoffman, after destroying his 80th American tank over 6 months of fighting, writes in his journal, "We win every engagement and lose the war daily. Each Sherman we burn is replaced tomorrow. Each liter of fuel we consume is gone forever. Mathematical certainty of our defeat looms larger than tactical certainty of our superiority." By autumn 1944, Panther crews recognize they are not fighting for victory, but for time-delaying inevitable defeat, hoping for miracle weapon or diplomatic settlement that will never arrive. The Panther remains king of battlefield, but its kingdom is shrinking. Starving, surrounded by enemies whose industrial reserves render German tactical excellence ultimately irrelevant. Yet pride remains. When Allied intelligence circulates reports of new American heavy tank entering production, German tankers dismiss it as propaganda. The Americans cannot build heavy tanks, one Panther commander scoffs. They only know mass production of inferior machines. This confidence, justified by 2 years of battlefield dominance, blinds Wehrmacht to possibility that defeat might teach Americans lessons victory never reveals. Somewhere in Detroit factories and Maryland testing grounds, those lessons are being forged into steel that will soon hunt the hunters. Some duels last 3 seconds, but determine decades. Cologne, Germany, March 6, 1945. The city burns with systematic thoroughness. RAF and USAAF bombers have spent months reducing Germany's fourth-largest metropolis to geometric patterns of rubble. Cathedral spires rise from devastation like accusations against heaven. Streets are canyons of shattered stone where tanks move slowly, wary of ambush from every shadow. Pershing No. 38 Fireball rolls through these ruins commanded by Staff Sergeant Clarence Smoyer. His crew consists of Gunner Corporal John DeRiggi, Loader Private Truman Evans, Driver Technician 5th Class William McVeigh, and Bow Gunner Private Elmer Kroll. They have trained together for 6 weeks. Today we'll test whether training translates to survival. The morning mission is straightforward: advance to Cologne Cathedral, secure surrounding blocks, deny German forces any observation posts overlooking Rhine bridges. Intelligence suggests German resistance is collapsing, but intelligence has been wrong before. At intersection of Komödienstrasse and Marzellenstrasse, everything changes in 3 seconds that redefine American armor forever. DeRiggi spots it first through his periscope. Panther, hull down position behind rubble, gun barrel already traversing toward them. Range: approximately 80 yards spitting distance by tank combat standards, range where armor thickness matters more than maneuver. Panther dead ahead! DeRiggi screams into intercom. Smoyer's mind compresses time. He has trained for this moment, rehearsed responses until they become reflex, but training happens on empty ranges without 75mm guns pointing at your chest. The Panther fires first. The shell hits Fireball's front glacis with sound like divine judgment, metallic scream, explosive concussion, tank rocking backward on suspension. Inside, the crew experiences moment of existential terror as they wait to discover whether they're already dead. Time stretches. Reality holds breath. No penetration. 3 inches of American steel, properly angled, has done its job. The Panther's shot, which would have punched through any Sherman like tissue paper, leaves only scar on Fireball's armor. Load AP. Smoyer orders, voice steady despite adrenaline transforming blood into electricity. Evans rams 90mm armor-piercing round into breech, 40 pounds of tungsten core death, guided by shaking hands that still execute procedure perfectly. Smell of cordite and hot metal fills turret. DeRiggi adjusts, compensating for range, acquiring aim point where Panther's turret meets hull weakest point inside profile. His training at Aberdeen emphasized this. Panther's frontal armor remains formidable, but flanks are vulnerable. Current angle gives him shot at junction of turret ring and hull side. He exhales, squeezes trigger. The 90mm M3 gun thunders with authority Sherman crews never experienced. Recoil hammers through deck plates. Shell crosses 80 yards faster than conscious thought, penetrates Panther's side armor, detonates inside crew compartment, ignites ammunition storage. The German tank jerks, belches smoke, catches fire. Flames pour from commander's hatch as crew attempts evacuation. Too slow. DeRiggi fires second round. This one strikes engine compartment, transforming mechanical death into inferno. The entire engagement, from first sighting to confirmed kill, 8 seconds. Combat cameraman Private Jim Bates, sheltering behind rubble with 3rd Armored's Public Affairs Detachment, captures the moment on 16mm film. His footage shaky, partially obscured by dust, utterly authentic, will become one of World War II's most iconic sequences. American heavy tank defeating German armor in direct frontal engagement, first time this has occurred on film. Inside Fireball. Silence. The crew sits frozen, processing survival. Then Smoyer breaks the stillness. That's for every Sherman that burned before us. The words carry weight beyond individual revenge. They represent vindication of every engineer who argued for heavier tanks, every procurement officer who fought McNair's doctrine, every tanker who died because American armor philosophy prioritized quantity over protection. News of Cologne engagement spreads through 3rd Armored Division within hours. Pershing has proven itself in combat, not against inferior opposition, not through numerical superiority, but in the test that matters most: direct duel against the Panther, machine that has dominated American armor for 2 years. But this vindication arrives too late to change war's trajectory. By March 1945, Germany is collapsing under weight of Soviet advance from east, Allied advance from west, strategic bombing that has devastated industrial capacity. Most Panthers sit immobile for want of fuel. Tiger production has ceased. Wehrmacht's armored divisions exist primarily on organizational charts rather than battlefields. The 20 Pershings that reach Europe under Operation Zebra see scattered combat skirmishes against last-ditch German resistance, occasional duels with isolated German armor. Their tactical impact is negligible. The war will end through overwhelming Allied numerical superiority, Soviet willingness to accept massive casualties, German industrial collapse, and Hitler's delusional leadership, not through American tank superiority. Yet Fireball's 3-second duel carries symbolic weight that transcends tactical results. It represents moment when American armor finally answered German technical supremacy with technical equivalence. It validates principle that industrial democracy, though initially unprepared for modern armored warfare, can learn, adapt, and ultimately field weapons matching enemies best. Colonel Wesley Yale, observing from 3rd Armored Division headquarters, understands this immediately. He cables Ordnance Chief General Barnes. Pershing has performed as designed. Request maximum production and deployment. The gap has been closed. But even as Yale writes this message, he knows the truth. Gap closed too late for thousands of American tankers who fought with inadequate equipment, too late to prevent losses that better armor might have averted, too late to change war already won through other means. Fireball parks near Cologne Cathedral that evening, its crew exhausted, its 90mm barrels still faintly smoking. Around them, infantry move through rubble, clearing pockets of resistance. Church bells ring somewhere through smoke, impossible sound in devastated city, perhaps imagination conjured from exhaustion. Smoyer climbs out, touches the scar on Fireball's glacis, where Panther's shell failed to penetrate. Under his fingers, American steel 3 inches thick, properly sloped, adequately hardened, has done what Sherman armor never could. Protected its crew from Germany's best. Too late for this war, he thinks, but just in time for the next. Victory purchased through acceptable losses becomes defeat when you calculate the cost in names rather than numbers. The final accounting of Sherman versus Panther engagements reveals mathematics that Pentagon officials prefer to discuss in classified briefings rather than public statements. American tankers develop bitter formula. 5-1. 5 Shermans lost for every Panther destroyed. In some engagements, particularly during first contact in Normandy, ratios approach 10-1. These numbers represent not machines but men. Each destroyed Sherman potentially means 5 dead tankers: commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver. Those survival rates varied depending on hit location, ammunition type, whether crew could evacuate before fire consumed them. Dr. Michael Dubler's research on armor casualties reveals stark reality. Sherman crews in Northwest Europe suffered casualty rates approaching 90%, meaning nearly every tanker who landed at Normandy either died, was wounded, or was replaced due to combat stress before war's end. These statistics were suppressed during wartime to maintain morale. Staff Sergeant Robert Early, who survived Normandy landings through VE Day, statistical impossibility for Sherman crewmen, later testified before Congressional Committee investigating military procurement failures. We knew our tanks were death traps. We knew Panthers could kill us from ranges where we couldn't hurt them. We fought anyway, because that's what soldiers do. But every time we lost a tank, every time we pulled burned bodies from hatches, we asked ourselves why our country sent us into battle with equipment inadequate for its purpose. The answer involves complex intersection of doctrine, industrial capacity, logistical constraints, and bureaucratic inertia factors that make perfect sense when explained in Pentagon briefing rooms, but offer no comfort to men burning alive in French hedgerows. General Leslie McNair's doctrine, mobility and quantity over armor and firepower, reflected genuine strategic logic. Sherman's narrow width allowed 3 to be shipped in space, required for 1 German heavy tank. Sherman's mechanical reliability exceeded German equivalents significantly. Sherman's production cost enabled America to field armor in quantities Germany could never match. These advantages were real and mattered strategically, but they did not matter to individual tank crews experiencing moment when German shell penetrated their armor and reality transformed into fire. By autumn 1944, American armored tactics had evolved to minimize Sherman vulnerability. Combined arms integration meant tanks rarely operated without infantry, artillery, and air support. Tank destroyers with heavier guns engaged German armor, while Shermans provided supporting fire. Elaborate flanking maneuvers attempted to negate German advantages in frontal engagement. These adaptations reduced casualties, but could not eliminate fundamental problem. In direct combat, Sherman was outclassed by German heavy armor. This truth, though tactically manageable through superior combined arms coordination, remained psychologically devastating to tankers who understood they fought in inferior equipment. The psychological dimension manifests in combat reports describing hesitation, requesting excessive artillery preparation before advancing, refusing to lead columns through terrain favoring ambush. These behaviors were rational survival responses, not cowardice, but they degraded operational effectiveness substantially. Combat psychiatrists deployed to armor units diagnosed increasing cases of what they termed tank anxiety, symptoms including nightmares about burning alive, compulsive checking of escape hatches, refusal to enter tanks without sedation. These cases were quietly transferred to rear echelon duties and expunged from official statistics to maintain unit morale. Meanwhile, surviving tankers developed gallows humor as psychological defense mechanism. They called Shermans Ronsons, referencing cigarette lighter advertising slogan, "Lights first time, every time," acknowledging tendency to burn catastrophically when penetrated. They called Shermans Tommy Cookers, British slang for portable stoves. They referred to themselves as members of the Zippo Club, tankers who had survived at least one burn injury. This humor masked trauma that would haunt survivors for decades. Post-war psychiatric studies revealed that Sherman crewmen suffered PTSD rates comparable to infantry who fought in sustained urban combat, highest among any military occupational specialty. The Pershing arrived too late to prevent this psychological catastrophe. By March 1945, when Fireball dueled Panther in Cologne, damage was done. Thousands of American tankers had already experienced terror of fighting in equipment they knew was inadequate. 20 Pershings deploying in war's final weeks could not repair 2 years of institutional failure that prioritized production efficiency over crew survivability. Yet Pershing's symbolic importance transcended its tactical impact. It represented acknowledgement, however belated, that American tankers deserved equipment, giving them fighting chance, rather than requiring heroic courage to compensate for engineering inadequacy. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson Hawkins, commanding 3rd Armored's 33rd Regiment, articulated this during post-war debriefing. The Pershing saved lives, yes, but more importantly, it saved faith. My tankers needed to know their country cared enough to build them proper tools. Even arriving late, Pershing showed we had learned from mistakes and corrected them. That mattered psychologically, even if it didn't change war's outcome militarily. The broader lesson involves tension between strategic logic and individual experience. McNair's doctrine was strategically sound. Sherman's advantages in production, reliability, and logistics contributed substantially to Allied victory. But strategic soundness offers cold comfort to individual soldier dying because his equipment was inadequate for its specific tactical role. Modern military procurement still struggles with this tension. How much should nations invest in protecting individual soldiers versus maximizing overall combat power? The answer involves calculations that reduce human life to statistical acceptable loss rates, mathematics that look defensible in briefing rooms, but horrify when translated into names on casualty lists. The Sherman Pershing story reminds us that these calculations have real human costs. Every procurement decision, choosing quantity over quality, mobility over protection, simplicity over performance, these choices kill specific people whose names appear on granite memorials rather than spreadsheets. As Dr. Christopher Gable noted in his study of armor development, the tragedy of American armor in World War II is not that Sherman was bad tank, it was adequate for many purposes. Tragedy is that we knew it was inadequate for fighting German heavy armor, yet institutional inertia prevented timely deployment of better alternatives. Men died because bureaucracy moved slower than bullets. This remains relevant as modern militaries face similar procurement challenges. Deploy existing capabilities that may be inadequate, or delay while developing superior systems that arrive too late. There are no perfect answers, only trade-offs measured in blood. The Pershing closed the gap, but at cost Americans still have difficulty acknowledging. Thousands of tankers fought and often died in equipment we knew was inferior to enemy's best. Their sacrifice purchased victory, but questions linger whether that victory could have been achieved at lower human cost if different procurement decisions had been made years earlier. These questions haunt Pentagon war rooms even today. Whenever new threats emerge and procurement officials must decide, deploy what we have or wait for what we need, rush inadequate solutions to battlefield or delay while perfect solutions mature, the ghosts of Sherman crews still whisper their answer. Send us with the best you can build, not the most you can afford. Some weapons arrive too late to change history, but just in time to shape memory. The M26 Pershing's operational history after VE Day reveals weapons searching for purpose in world transformed by atomic age. 20 tanks saw combat in Europe. None fundamentally altered war's trajectory. Yet Pershing's symbolic resonance extended far beyond its tactical impact. It represented American acknowledgement that industrial might alone, without technical excellence, could not guarantee military supremacy. As Allied occupation forces moved into shattered Germany, Pershings were prominently displayed in defeated cities, visual demonstrations of American industrial capacity, finally matching its ambition. Soviet observers photographed them obsessively, intelligence officers measuring dimensions, estimating armor thickness, calculating how IS-3 heavy tanks might fare in hypothetical engagement. These observations fed directly into Cold War arms competition that would dominate next 4 decades. The Korean War provided Pershing's true operational test. Renamed M26 Patton after substantial mechanical upgrades, American heavy tanks faced Soviet-built T-34, 85 seconds, and encountered same dynamics that defined Sherman-Panther relationship but reversed. North Korean T-34 seconds, excellent medium tanks by 1945 standards, were hopelessly outmatched by American heavy armor mounting 90mm guns. At Pusan Perimeter, at Incheon, throughout grinding advance and retreat of 1,950 to 1,953, American tankers finally experienced what German Panther crews had known. Technical superiority translated directly into battlefield dominance. But Korean War also revealed Pershing's limitations. Engine problems persisted, the same Ford GAF that powered Shermans, now struggling under 46 tons. Transmission failures plagued operations. Fuel consumption limited operational range. American armor had closed firepower gap but remained vulnerable to mechanical reliability issues that German engineers had never fully solved in Panther either. The fundamental lesson: technical excellence means little if logistical foundation cannot sustain it. This truth, learned through Sherman's inadequacy and Pershing's lateness, shaped American armor development for remainder of 20th century. M48 Patton, M60 series, eventually M1. Abrams each represented evolutionary refinement of principles established by Pershing's rush development. Heavy armor, powerful gun, mechanical reliability prioritized equally with combat performance. Staff Sergeant Clarence Smoyer, Fireball's commander at Cologne, lived until 2019, surviving long enough to see grandson deployed to Iraq commanding M1A2 Abrams. The generational symbolism was profound. Weapon system that began as emergency response to German technical superiority had evolved into platform-dominating armored warfare for 7 decades. In an interview conducted shortly before his death, Smoyer reflected on Pershing's legacy. "We proved that Americans could build great tanks, not just many tanks. That mattered more than people realize." Whole Cold War arms race started from lessons learned when we got beaten by German armor and had to build something better. Pershing was first time we admitted maybe quantity isn't enough, you need quality too. This philosophical transformation extended beyond armor to entire American military-industrial complex. Post-war procurement emphasized technical superiority increasingly over numerical advantage. Strategic Air Command invested in B-52 bombers rather than masses of B-29 seconds. Navy developed nuclear submarines rather than conventional subfleets. Army pursued M14 rifle with 7.62mm cartridge rather than continuing with M1 Garand. Not all these choices proved wise. M14 notably failed in Vietnam, replaced rapidly by M16. But the underlying philosophy reflected lessons learned from Sherman experience. Sometimes adequate equipment deployed in massive quantities loses to excellent equipment deployed in sufficient quantities. The counter lesson that excellent equipment arriving too late matters less than adequate equipment arriving promptly remained equally valid but received less emphasis in Cold War's technological competition fever. Dr. Richard Ogorkovitz, preeminent armor historian, summarized this tension perfectly. Pershing teaches us that military procurement involves managing trade-offs between performance, reliability, production time, and cost. Perfect balance is impossible. Sherman chose production speed and reliability over performance. Pershing chose performance over production speed. Neither choice was wrong, they reflected different circumstances and priorities. The tragedy occurs when institutions refuse to adjust choices as circumstances change. This remains relevant as modern militaries confront similar dilemmas. Should United States invest in developing next-generation platforms or maximize production of current systems? Should procurement prioritize cutting-edge technology that may be unreliable or proven designs that may be outdated? These questions echo debates that produce both Sherman's inadequacy and Pershing's lateness. The human dimension completes Pershing's legacy. Organizations like 3rd Armored Division Association kept memory alive through reunions, oral histories, memorial dedications. Survivors like Smoyer spent decades speaking to schools, appearing in documentaries, ensuring younger generations understood cost of unpreparedness. These efforts ensure that Pershing's story transcends mere technical specifications and combat statistics. It becomes cautionary tale about institutional arrogance, believing McNair's doctrine would prevail, despite contrary battlefield evidence, and redemptive story about capacity to learn from mistakes before those mistakes prove fatal. As Staff Sergeant Robert Early testified before Congress in 1947, "We lost thousands of good men because we sent them into battle with equipment we knew was inadequate. Pershing arrived too late to save them, but just in time to prove we could do better." Let that be lesson for future generations. When soldiers say their equipment isn't good enough, listen to them. They're the ones who'll die if you're wrong. This testimony, though delivered 75 years ago, echoes through modern defense procurement debates. From body armor controversies in Iraq to up-armored Humvee shortages in Afghanistan, pattern repeats. Soldiers identify equipment deficiencies, institutional bureaucracy resists change, eventual corrections arrive too late for some, just in time for others. The Pershing paradox remains unsolved. How do institutions balance urgency of current conflicts against importance of getting solutions right? Rush inadequate equipment to battle or delay deploying superior alternatives? There are no perfect answers, only tragic trade-offs measured in blood and steel. As March 6 Cologne duel recedes into history, its significance crystallizes. 3 seconds, when American armor finally answered German technical superiority with technical parity. Too late to change war's outcome. Just in time to change America's understanding of what modern armored warfare required. Fireball sits today in Fort Benning's Armor Museum, Panther kill ring painted on its barrel, scar from Panther's shot still visible on glacis plate. Visitors touch that scar, feeling texture of American failure and redemption forged into a single piece of steel. Some arrived too late to matter tactically, but just in time to matter symbolically. The Pershing's true victory was not defeating Panthers. It was defeating American complacency that believed numerical superiority alone guaranteed success. That lesson, purchased with thousands of Sherman crews' lives, remains Pershing's enduring legacy. Never again send soldiers into battle with equipment known to be inadequate. And if you do expect them to remember, to testify, to ensure history judges those procurement decisions harshly. The M26 Pershing arrived too late to save many, but it arrived just in time to teach lessons that might save others. In the calculus of war, that may be all redemption inadequate institutions can hope to achieve.